Hi everyone. So one of the things we thought we might do for art this week was to construct a diorama. Some of you might have made a diorama before. If you haven't, a diorama is kind of like a little model of a room or a world. So if you imagine, if you go to the theatre or if you go to a musical, there's a stage and all the characters play on that stage and act. And it looks like a little world. It has a backdrop, it has scenery. So a diorama is kind of like a small version of a stage that you could maybe use to, act something out with puppets or with action figures or dolls or anything you have. So usually we would use a shoebox to make a diorama. The reason for that is because if you want to make a really simple diorama, you just turn the shoebox on its side. You have the open bit here. The bottom is the floor, the top is the ceiling, the sides are the walls. And then all you really need to do is decorate the inside either by painting it or by drawing and colouring paper and then gluing the paper inside. Or you could get very inventive and use wrapping paper or old bits of wallpaper or scraps of fabric and that. So today I'm just going to show you how to make the structure, how to make the shape. So we're not going to be doing any of the decorating. And I'm not really going to finish this one. I'm just going to show you some kind of tips of how to keep it together. So we said a shoebox was the easy one. But one of the things I said to my class recently was about being flexible. And if you don't have a shoebox, you can use something else. So I don't happen to have a shoebox. I have a lot of other cardboard that was delivered over the last while to my house. So I'm going to use some of that instead. This kind of thicker card, which is like what a shoebox is made out of, this is probably the best for making this because it's the strongest. You can also use the inside of a cereal box. And again, you can ask your parents if it's okay with them. The cereal doesn't all have to be gone. Your parents will tell you the cereal all has to be gone. But actually, most of these cereal boxes have a plastic bag inside. So you could ask your parents, is it okay to whip out the plastic bag and use the box? They might say yes, they might say no. But top one to use is this kind of heavier card, similar to a shoebox, or the packages that stuff from Amazon come in. The benefits are that it's really sturdy. But the downside is, the sturdier it is, the harder it is to stick things to it, the harder it is to attach things to it. Next best one is the cereal box. Its downside is that it's less sturdy, but because it's less sturdy, it's actually much easier to stick things to it. You can use sellotape, you can use glue, you can use lots and lots of different things like that. Whereas the harder card, it is a bit harder to stick. But we're going to have a look at that now in 1 second. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is decide what sort of a shape our diorama is going to be. I can't use the simple shoebox shape because I don't have a shoebox. And if you are using a shoebox, if you don't want to use the simple shape, first thing I would do is I would explode that shoebox. Get it all open and flat and see what you have to work with, okay? So if we look at this here, okay, I could start off with my diorama like this. Okay, I could have a floor here and a backdrop. Now, if I do that, it's just going to fall down. So that means I need to have something here to hold up my sides. Isn't that right? So the easiest thing I can do there is make a support that goes from somewhere here to the floor. And that will keep this upright. And look, as luck would have it, see these guys here are folded. So that's already giving me a clue. I'm going to cut these little sides off and I'm going to use them to shore up this part here. So, off I go. Okay, so I went and I cut off those two sides to try and hold up the back of my diorama. So how am I going to do that? If I just stick it there, it's going to fall off. So what we're doing is, and this is probably the most important thing in making any sort of construction in cardboard, we're making what I call a tab, or some people might just call it a flap. So I'm going to fold that bit there, and then that means that can stick to here, and I can staple it down. Or if I do it the other way, I can stick it there and it's actually going to be invisible. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to fold a tab on one end for stapling down. See, it's on that end, and I'm going to do one on the other end in the same direction. So what you'll see is you can see the two of them sticking up there. In fact, I'm going to make this one a little bit bigger because I think it needs to be. So I am going to find a place on my base to staple it, and then a place on my back to staple it. So let me just do that now. Now, stapler is probably the best thing you can use for this type of cardboard, but I mean, I know you're in 4th and 5th class, so I shouldn't have to tell you this, but do be careful because it is quite easy to staple your fingers and it is not very nice. And the last thing we want to be doing at the moment is taking a trip to a doctor with a stapled finger, because let's face it, they're busy enough at the moment, aren't they? So I've stapled it to the bottom and I'm stapling it here, and bit of maths learning, what sort of angle do I create? Yeah, it's a right angle, and a right angle, making that kind of invisible triangle there is going to make this really strong. So then I need to get in and do my other staple in here. Now again, if you had to, you could use sellotape for this, but with this kind of tough card, it's not really going to be as good. So I'm going to staple here. And if it's hard to get your staple into the space, you can open it up like that and it will make it a bit easier. But again, be really, really careful with your fingers. Like, again, in 4th and 5th class, you should be able to do that without any help, but just do be careful. Okay, so I have those guys in there and I'm going to do the same to the other side. Okay, so I have put my two, we could call them struts, with their flaps, our two supports. I've put them there, I've stapled them. You'll see that because this piece of cardboard had a fold in it, my triangle shape is lost. I'm kind of getting more of a curve. That's okay, it's never going to be perfect, as long as now I have a stage set. So I have my floor where I can put things on, and I have a backdrop. Now, I can also use these struts here as further support. So if I want to disguise that this is even here, I can now stick other things to that. I could stick on a small side going this way, and I'm going to do that now in a moment. Or I could, if I was doing a landscape, I could turn this into a tree, or I could stick something to it to make it into a house. So I'm just going to show you that now in 1 second. But that is your basic shape. If you can make that shape, you can pretty much do anything from this point on. But I'm just going to show you a few little ideas that you could do to add to it, okay? So here are some simple shapes that we could add in to our diorama. So first one I'm going to do is a tree. So base of my tree is a trunk. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add branches. You see, I just got this bit of card and I just kind of cut it out almost so it looks like fingers. And I've done this twice. So what I would do is I'd just get them. And you know, your staple will go through a good bit of card. Now again, if you don't want to use a stapler, you could use some glue. Now it would have to be liquid PVA glue, and you're going to need to hold on to it for a little bit till it sets. You could use sellotape or top tip masking tape. And the reason masking tape, which is this kind of papery feeling tape, the reason this is very good is that you can paint this easily. Whereas if you try and paint sellotape, the paint is just going to slide off it. So I know it doesn't look great or that much like a tree, but actually, because we're a green school, the bits I cut out, the bits that would have fit in here, I kept them. So they can go on at kind of odd angles. I'll staple a few of them in there. And I'll be very careful not to what? It would be very embarrassing now if the teacher on the video was stapling his fingers together. Probably be very funny for you, but not for me. So those little branches, we can just put them on at some odd angles here, there and everywhere. I'm not going to do them all, just to give you the idea. And then I know it still doesn't look great like a tree, but that's where a bit of creativity comes in. Bit of crushing and pulling and twisting. And next thing you know, you have kind of a creepy looking tree. Okay, and like, you know what? experiment with different lengths of branches. If you wanted to, you could get a bit of cotton wool if you had some in the bathroom, and you could stick that on as leaves. You could make leaves out of paper. But there you'll see, I kind of now have a kind of a creepy, evil looking tree. What I can do is I can just stick that right on here, okay, and it will actually hide that support. If I don't want to make my support structure really obvious, there I put my creepy looking tree on to hide it. And it doesn't look like much now, but when it's painted it will look a bit better. So that's the tree. Now, the other one, because I was kind of thinking of a kind of a fairy tale style thing, I thought we could make a tower. So you can see my tower shape here. Simple. I took a piece, I folded it, I cut a triangle out of the top, and then I just bend those two together. You see, nobody's going to see the back of that, so it doesn't actually need to be perfect. So what I'm going to do to stick this here is just like I said earlier. I'm going to use the masking tape, super easy to tear and then easy to paint. And literally all I'm doing, doesn't matter if it looks a bit weird because you're going to paint over it later. And there is a kind of a tower shape, which you could put somewhere in the middle, you could put here. Now, important point, if you want to stick this to the ground, what are you going to need? You're going to need one of those tabs. So what you would do is you would just snip and fold. Okay, remember the tabs we made earlier? And then you can use those. You can staple them. If you don't want to see them, you could do them on the inside, okay? And then you have these little guys here, and you can either staple to them or you can use some tape. There's your tower shape. Now the other thing you could do, which I probably should have done before this, is put some windows in it. So I'm going to show you now how to put a hole into the center of a shape like this. So I want to put a hole in the center of the shape like this. It would be really tempting to get this scissors and try and jam it through from the other side. But if I told you to do that, I'd probably get in trouble because you would probably put that in through your hand. So don't do that. What we do instead, if I want my hole here, I'm going to fold this. So I'm folding it again. So see the way it was like this? And now it's folded. And where that fold is, I'm going to cut, just a little cut, and do another little cut. And so what that folding and cutting has done is it has created a little space, a little hole where I can get the scissors through. Okay, and I give the scissors a bit of a waggle, and now that means I have room to come and cut like this. Again, it's not going to look perfect, it doesn't need to look perfect, because when you make little errors and stuff like this, you can do a lot of hiding of errors with paint and with different things. So I've made a little hole, and I've made my hole by putting the scissors through the hole and then waggle, 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 waggle. I have made it big enough that I can actually now do a bit of cutting. Okay, and I go around. Again, doesn't need to be perfect, because you know what, if you're doing a tower, it's probably going to be like an old ruined tower anyway. So if the holes look a bit iffy, we can just tell people it's because it's a really old tower, and then we're grand. Okay, I'm going to do a few on the other side. I might just do one in this side actually, just because we don't want it to look too symmetrical, because again, older buildings would be a little bit less symmetrical because, you know, they wouldn't be built with all the modern engineering knowledge that we have now. So I've done that, fold it out a bit, chop it off the edge. So now I've made my holes. I go back to my masking tape, close up my pointed bit at the top. Now again guys, this is just an example, just to show you a few, I suppose, ideas of how to make a structure which is strong, which isn't going to fall apart, alright? This can be whatever you want it to be. I just did these two particular ones because they were big and they would be a good way to hide my supports. So again, remember, if I'm sticking something down, I need to fold the bottom for a tab, and this time I think this one's going to be fine with just a bit of masking tape because it's quite a strong three-dimensional structure anyway. So I'm going to grab a bit of masking tape. I'm just going to stick that down like that. Okay, so now I have my tower and my tree. There are loads of things you could put here. If you wanted to make a house, all you need to do is cut out a 2D shape of a house and just do a little tab. Stick this to the back of the house and stick this to the floor. This is your number one tool for making your diorama, is a tab. For something small, that's all you need. A little L shape, stick this to one end, stick that to the other end. If you think about it, this is the way shelves and things are made. They have these little L-shaped brackets in them. So, simple one, little L-shaped tab. If it's something bigger, you might need to make maybe a triangle shaped tab because that will support more weight, okay? But that's your basic thing that you're going to do here, is tabs to hold your structure in place. And really guys, the sky is the limit here. I could do a big shape here. Let's say I want to do Jack and the Beanstalk. I could cut out a big shape of a cloud. I could stick a castle in the back. Anything I wanted. And this can be on any theme that you want. So, here's your job for art. Make one of those. Step 1. Decide what you want to make. Think of a theme. Is it going to be a fairy tale? Is it going to be something from a computer game that you're playing? Something from a book you're reading? A scene out of a movie that you really like? A scene out of a TV show that you really like? Or did you actually go and see a play or a musical and you want to recreate one of the backdrops of that? So step 1, decide what it is. Step 2, pencil and paper and make a sketch drawing. Step 3, look at that sketch drawing and be realistic. So what that means is if you have a beautiful, really light, delicate, tall structure, you might need to stop and think, is that really going to work? Is that going to stand up? Or is that going to be very difficult to do? Is there a simpler way for me to do it? Or do I need to maybe leave that out and try something a bit more realistic? Step 4, do it. Give it a go. If it doesn't work, doesn't matter. What a really good artist does, they make mistakes. They make those mistakes look like they were deliberate. You know, if something falls apart, you can tape it back together. You can staple bits on the end. You can make a design and recreate it to be something totally different. This is for you. It's not for anyone else. So, take as much time as you want with it. Spend as much time on it as you like. And if it doesn't work out perfect, find a way to change it, to make it into something that, even if it isn't perfect, and even if it isn't what you initially imagined, can it be something that still tells the story that you want to tell? Alright? And what was the main rule? Flexibility. I didn't have a shoebox, and I made do with what I had. You're not going to be going out buying stuff for this because there's not really a lot of places you can go to at the minute. Make do of what you have. And if you've nothing at home, if you've no cardboard, could it be made out of plastic bottles? If you've no materials whatsoever, and let's face it, that's not going to be true because you probably have a big recycling bin full of materials somewhere in your house that you could clean and use. But if it turns out that you really, really don't have any of that stuff, fine. Leave this and don't do it this week. Draw a picture instead, and maybe next week or the week after, because shopping will have been done and maybe a lot of online shopping is being done at the moment, some cardboard might turn up, or some plastic, or some milk cartons, or some egg boxes. Remember, flexibility. It doesn't have to be exactly what I said. How can you make it work? Alright, I'm really looking forward to seeing these. So when you have it made, you can send a photograph to me or to your teacher. You can choose to send us the photograph this week when you've just done the structure, and then you could choose to paint it next week and send a photo to us next week, or you could wait and have the whole thing done. And the very last thing I'm going to say, once again, flexibility, because I just used the word paint. And it's quite possible that you don't have paint in your house. So what do you do if you don't have paint? You get paper, you colour it in, you stick it on. You see if there's wrapping paper lying around, if there's old wallpaper, if there's bits of fabric. But at the end of the day, if you've nothing at all, then black and white or one colour, which we call monochrome, is actually a very, very fashionable art form as well. So if you've nothing to paint it with, it doesn't have to be painted. Just tell us a really good story. I can't wait to see them. Bye bye.